If someone asked you what the scariest place on Earth is, you'd probably say a haunted house, a dark forest, or maybe the open ocean. But honestly, there aren't many places more terrifying than a narrow, pitch-black cave. The kind of place where even your GPS would basically say, "Sorry, you're on your own now." And what happened inside a cave in South Africa in 1984 feels more like a horror movie than real life. September 29, 1984. South Africa's famous Sterkfontein Cave. 3 experienced cave divers, Nuno Gomes, Peter Verhulsel, and Malcolm, had entered an unexplored section of the cave. Their mission was simple: lay down a guideline underwater. In other words, they were heading into the kind of place where getting lost was almost another word for death. At first, everything went according to plan. But on the way back, one small mistake changed everything. Peter drifted away from the main route, and then the fine silt at the bottom of the water was disturbed. Within seconds, visibility dropped to almost zero. Nobody could see anything. Nuno and Malcolm did everything they could to find Peter, but they couldn't. Eventually, they made it back to the surface and called for help. Police divers launched a search operation. But after some time, they reached a heartbreaking conclusion. They believed Peter was already dead, and the search was called off. But they were wrong, because Peter was still alive. After losing his way, he had somehow reached a small air-filled chamber deep inside the cave. Maybe he believed the rescue team would find him, and perhaps that hope was the only thing keeping him alive. Total darkness. No food, no voices, no human contact. Just waiting. 1 hour, 1 day, then several days. People say humans fear loneliness, but maybe something even more terrifying is waiting to die alone. Days passed. Up above, life went on as usual, but deep beneath the ground, Peter was still waiting for a miracle. Sadly, that miracle never came. About 6 weeks later, searchers finally found his body. But the most heartbreaking part wasn't the discovery itself. It was a small message he had left behind. "I love you, Cheryl and Ma." Later, an autopsy revealed something even more tragic. Peter had survived for nearly 3 weeks inside that cave. In the end, hunger and exhaustion claimed his life. Personally, I don't think the most terrifying part of this story is the cave itself. It's hope, because until his very last breath, Peter was probably thinking, maybe today someone will find me. But sometimes nature reminds us of a cruel truth. Deep underground, darkness isn't just the absence of light. Sometimes, it swallows hope too. If you ever find yourself inside a cave and an experienced diver starts explaining something called the rule of thirds, pay attention. Because in cave diving, it's not just advice. It's the line between life and death. And in 1974, 2 friends learned the lesson the hard way. June 15th, 1974, South Wales. 26-year-old Roger Solari and his 23-year-old partner Martin Farr set out to map one of the deepest and most dangerous sections of Agen Allwedd Cave, known as Sump 4. At the time, Martin Farr was already considered one of Britain's most experienced cave divers, and Roger was no amateur either. But nature doesn't care how much experience you have. In cave diving, there's a famous rule called the rule of thirds. 1/3 of your air is for going in, 1/3 is for getting back out, and the final third is reserved for emergencies. In other words, if things don't go according to plan, that remaining air becomes your last hope. But that day, both men ignored the rule. And there was another problem. Roger's air tank was smaller than Martin's. Still, they probably thought everything would be fine. After all, experienced people often believe that accidents happen to someone else. For hours, the 2 men continued mapping the deeper sections of the cave. But when it was finally time to head back, everything changed. Roger's air supply began running dangerously low, and then another disaster struck. The water had turned into a cloud of silt. Visibility was almost completely gone. It was like someone had poured black ink into the water. And even worse, the guideline had been cut. Now there was nothing but darkness, panic, and rapidly disappearing air. Martin tried to help his friend, but in situations like that, seconds can feel like hours. Eventually, the 2 men became separated, and then Martin had to make a decision he probably carried with him for the rest of his life. If he kept searching for Roger, neither of them might make it out. So with the little reserve air he had left, Martin somehow managed to reach the surface. But Roger never came back. The cave of darkness and water had claimed him forever. And the saddest part? His body couldn't be recovered right away. Not after a day, not after a month, but but after 12 long years. Finally, in 1986, Roger's body was brought out of the cave. Personally, I don't think the most frightening part of this story is the cave itself. It's the reminder that sometimes a small mistake and the simple thought that everything will probably be fine can make years of experience meaningless. And maybe that's why cave divers often repeat one simple saying: the cave will always be there. But if you make a mistake, you might not be. So far, we've seen that darkness is one of the biggest enemies anyone can face inside a cave. But it's not the only one. There's another enemy that's just as deadly: rain. And what happened inside an English cave on June 24, 1967, shocked the entire country. That day, 10 experienced cavers entered Mossdale Caverns. Their goal was to clear and map some of the deeper sections of the cave. But Mossdale was no ordinary cave. It was infamous for its incredibly narrow passages. Some sections were so tight that the only way forward was to crawl. And if you're claustrophobic, you might start feeling uncomfortable just listening to this story. After several hours, 4 members decided to turn back because of the difficult conditions. But the remaining 6 continued deeper. Eventually, they reached an area known as the Far Marathon Passage, a section barely 18 inches high and 12 inches wide, and running through it was a small stream. At first, it probably didn't seem like much, but nature has a habit of turning small problems into deadly ones. Meanwhile, conditions on the surface had changed. Heavy rain had begun, and little by little, that rain started making its way into the cave. At first, no one paid much attention. After all, rain usually stops, but this time, it only got worse. Before long, the water level inside the cave began rising dangerously fast. The 6 cavers immediately decided to head back, but by then, it was already too late. They were still nearly 3 hours away from the entrance, and between them and the outside world was rapidly rising water. People on the surface soon realized something was wrong. They noticed that water had built up around the cave entrance, creating what looked like a small lake. And that's when one of the most difficult cave rescue operations in British history began. Hundreds of volunteers, expert divers, rescue teams. Everyone was focused on one thing: pump out the water, get oxygen inside, reach the 6 men somehow. But nature had other plans. The rain kept falling, the water kept rising, and the cave's narrow passages made the rescue almost impossible. As the hours passed, hope slowly began to fade, and eventually, the news everyone feared finally arrived. All 6 cavers had died. The cave they had entered to explore and map had become their final destination. Personally, I don't think the most terrifying part of this story is death itself. It's the thought that those men probably never gave up hope. Maybe they believed the rescue team was only minutes away. Maybe they thought the rain would stop. But sometimes nature reminds us of a harsh truth. Inside a cave, humans are only visitors. And when nature decides to close the door, there isn't always a way back out. If a cave is so dangerous that people start calling it the Cave of Death, you'd think that nature had already given everyone a pretty clear warning. But sometimes, human curiosity turns out to be stronger than common sense. And what happened on August 18, 2005, would cost 4 friends their lives. August 18, 2005, Provo, Utah, home to a mysterious cave that locals had long nicknamed the Cave of Death. At around 3 a.m., a group of 5 friends arrived at Gollum's Cave. The cave was already infamous for its dangerous passages and deadly conditions. Maybe that's why people had given it such a chilling name. One member of the group stayed outside. The other 4 ventured in. But getting inside wasn't easy. One by one, they had to completely submerge themselves and squeeze through a narrow tunnel nearly 15 feet long and only about 3 to 4 feet wide. But the real danger was still waiting for them. On the other side, they reached a small chamber with only about 3 feet of airspace. To them, it probably felt like safety. But they had no idea that sometimes, even the air itself can become your enemy. The air inside wasn't normal. It was what cavers call bad air. Oxygen levels were dangerously low, and carbon dioxide levels were extremely high. Slowly, the toxic atmosphere began affecting them. Their ability to think became impaired. Their bodies grew weak, and most dangerously of all, their ability to hold their breath underwater started to decline. That's probably when they realized they needed to get out. But by then, it was already too late. As the first man attempted to swim back through the narrow passage, the effects of carbon dioxide caused him to panic. Surrounded by darkness and water, he couldn't find the exit, and he became trapped. When he didn't return, the second friend went in after him, then the third, then The fourth, and one by one, all 4 men became trapped in that underwater tunnel forever. Outside, the 5th friend probably had no idea what had happened, but when the truth finally emerged, everyone was horrified. All 4 men were dead. And perhaps the most terrifying part of the story is this: they weren't killed by a monster. There was no flood, no collapsing rocks. The thing that killed them was the very air they thought would keep them alive. After the tragedy, authorities made a difficult decision. Gollum's cave was permanently sealed with concrete to make sure no one else would repeat the same mistake. And maybe that's why experienced cavers often say, the cave isn't trying to kill you. It simply doesn't care whether you make it back out. So, if you enjoy strange history, mysteries, and stories that prove reality can be stranger than fiction, be sure to subscribe to Nen's Chronicles. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.